dogs and things like that. So
hey,
kind of back in.
How's it going? You're back in the kitchen with TheEZGZ. I'm hard at work, and as you can see in the background here, it's a good day to be on the computer. In about 2 hours, we've got the grass just about covered. We got one of those spring snowstorms blowing through, and I've been pushing forward on the 1776 single port build. Let's go out in the garage and I'll show you what's going on and how far I got. Turned up the heat in the garage. Yeah, look at that. I'm doing a little mock-up here. Got the cylinders all on. I'm doing, since this is a kind of experimental engine, a lot of unknown factors, and everything is used parts so far. I'm just cleaning out the garage and taking everything I can to build myself an engine. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and stick with a generator, just because generators have a little bit more room. I'm gonna have to wrestle this engine off the shelf, but there's a little bit more room. I was thinking about going with an alternator, but with the generator on a single port center mount, you just have so much more room. And I really don't need any more of that. 30 amp has gotten me by for a long time. I'm noticing so many things too as I'm putting this together. The spark plugs are going to be so much easier to access now on both sides than with the dual carb, dual manifold like this one over here on my 1800 engine. You know, you have to grind down a spark plug socket just to get around the studs on the intake manifold, and you could put shorter studs and do different things, do some grinding, but the problem I am having is coming up with an exhaust. It seems like, well, let's go back to this one over here. You can see on this one, this would be a cool exhaust for this engine, but I cut the flanges off for the preheat because I thought, I'll never use a single carburetor. I got these dual carburetors. Why would I want to go backwards? No, I got to have more power and speed. But I just come full circle. You know, it is really, really fun to have big engines and big power. And I'm telling you, with a big engine, I think you thrash your engine less. You're not as hard on your engine because you don't have to gain RPM. You can get horsepower out of a 1600, 1776, and all these little engines with a 69 stroke crank, but generally you have to put a cam in them and you're revving them up, and there's just so many times when you're out on the trail or get caught in traffic if you're, you know, for using it for dual purpose, that you're not revving it all the time. You want something that's gonna really idle smooth and go even, and I don't know, it seems like I've been doing this for so long, and it's always the worst possible time that you get junk in an idle jet, and I don't care what kind of air cleaners you use or filters you put in your fuel line, that stuff is like magic. One day it's running great, and you go into the store and come back out and it's just not running right. And it's not that I guess I'm just getting old. Sometimes I just don't want to mess with stuff. It's okay when I'm running around here in town because I can come home, pull it in the shop here, get in the shade, got all my tools, got all my parts, but I'm away from home a lot more, and I'm going farther away from home. And I go up, everything I do up in the mountains around here, they're pretty far away, out of the way places. And you know, that rock solid reliability and that type of thing becomes more important. And I do a lot of stuff alone during the week because I am retired. I don't like to deal with the crowds and things that are up there. So it's just reliability is starting to mean a lot more to me. Now you look at these and somebody's going to say, oh, you don't want to put those on. You don't make us enough power. I've had these things for years. They came on my very first 1776 sandrail, and they probably don't help your power at all. But you know what? They do sound kind of cool. I probably won't go with it, but this particular manifold has got the flanges on it. I know, and especially being early spring like this, I'm going to need heat in this manifold. Maybe later on in the summer, I can switch exhausts and not have to have that on there. But for a single port manifold, it also supports the carburetor. These are so small, and you've only got that one. I don't have much experience with these single port setups like this. I'm thinking to myself, maybe I shouldn't have factored this in quite so fast. Maybe I'll go from the case over here and put a bracket that comes up underneath this carburetor nut. Haven't figured out what I want to do or how I want to do it. In the past, I could come off a generator bolt. I might even be able to come off the generator strap that goes around the generator and tuck something in here just to solidify it, because I am going to run a big off-road type air cleaner on top here, which is going to add some weight to it. And when you get shaking around and stuff, you don't want to have problems, like I said. I maybe even do away with this this fan shroud. I'm not sure. I'm already, I've been robbing things off of this one, and I've been coming across some stuff. I've got this little adapter for a remote oil cooler. I'm already moving ahead in my mind, thinking about the things. This was so much fun to build this engine. A lot of things to overcome. The cylinders didn't want to sit right, but like I say, I'm going to do. This is a used part engine, and I'm doing a lot of experimenting on this. I used like 3 different kinds of sealers. Usually I use under the cylinders, where the shim is, I use the 700 degree RTV copper impregnated silicone, and it's always worked well for me in the past. I decided I'd try something different this time. What did I use this time? I decided to go with this ultra black, advanced from a maximum oil resistance gasket maker. So you can see this was full. I did all 4 cylinders. You don't need to put it on super thick. I put it on about the size of a worm. Not a night crawler, but a regular old garden worm. Just get it right down there in the corner, and I do not smear it with my finger, and it leaves a nice round bead. Hopefully it works good. Now, where the head bolts go into the case savers, some of those were looser than others. I tried some of this, what is it here? I tried some of this 518 gasket eliminator by Loctite. I used it on case halves years ago, and it worked fine on that, but it says flexes with flanges. It didn't really say, steel on steel. Some of them, like this ultra black, it'll say right on the bottom, and I'm not seeing it on this one. Where else did I see that? Instant gasket sealer. This is like a small one that I would take with me when I go camping or something like that, or go out of town. A lot of them will say metal or aluminum, steel, that type of thing. I use the actual the gasket cinch, that Permatex aviation sealer on some of these head bolts. On one side I use the aviation cement on the head bolts. On the other side I use the 518, and on all 4 cylinders I use that ultra black. So we'll see how this works out, because I don't have a problem with taking my engines out. If I don't like this cam, if I don't like my oil pressure, if I don't like something about this thing, it's a lot easier to make that decision quickly. When you have all your tools out and your garage is all set up for engine rebuild and this thing is clean, it's better than putting it in the car and driving it for a year or 2, and then you've got this mess to clean up. Most of the time, this has been a pretty simple build for the most part. I spent a lot of time cleaning these cylinders. I generally don't reuse cylinders, but in this time, and I couldn't find my cylinder hone. I searched and searched, and I couldn't find my cylinder hone. And I had some 220 wet dry sandpaper, and I just used my hands, and I went in a circular fashion back and forth. I laid a sponge in there, and I just moved it back. I just deglazed the cylinders basically, and I put some plain old Grant piston rings, some cast iron Grant rings. These pistons were forged Moly pistons, but everything went in pretty good. I took the studs out, I used the bolts, and I like the way they came from CB Performance, and the next time I put in one of these oil pumps, I'm going to put it in the freezer. I did that once before and I never seem to remember to do it. And you need to leave it in there for a few hours. Don't put the steel gears in there, but if you put it in the refrigerator, it might slip into the case a little bit easier. This was a tight fit, and I just put a little gasket sealer between the on both sides of the gasket, and I set that in place. I put a couple of studs in there to use them as guides, and then I just unscrewed the studs and I put the Allen bolts that came with the pump. Two of them are larger because it's a little bit thicker on the left side than these two on the right side. And I'm real happy with the way it looks. I'm happy with the way it fits. And no, I'm not running the other extra tin around here. Something I want to tell you, when you use these oil filters, the side mount job like this, if you have any type of sedan performance exhaust that snakes out and comes underneath the apron, your header will not clear here. If you have the type of header exhaust that comes out under a stock sedan, it will not clear this oil filter. You might want to reconsider what you're doing. This is a dune buggy type exhaust. This exhaust will not fit on my Baja. But I'm trying to mock this all up so I can look at it, and I wanted to check out these flanges. I have another set of headers here, used headers, and I cut the flanges off of that one. It just so happens the header system that I have on the Baja now looks similar, and it has the flanges. And as I look at this thing, oh my gosh, I think I found out where those 10-year-old Chinese kids learn how to weld, because this is just horrible. This is like a 1.5 inch exhaust, and look how small and restricted. I'm definitely going to get in there with the grinder, although it's not that critical on a 1776. When you start getting larger motors, 2 liter and above, you have to start paying more attention to free-flowing exhaust. And it's not a good idea to buy an 1 5/8 exhaust and put it on a small engine. It slows down the airspeed. You will lose the scavenging effect of the header system, which is why you got it in the first place. They run these long, equal tube, equal length headers so that all the cylinders are pushing at the same rate, and it helps with the scavenging effect. If you're running a 1600 or a 1776 and you're staying under 5,000 RPM, which is plenty, believe me, an 1 3/8 is exhaust, and nobody makes them anymore. They used to make 1 3/8 headers, and you'll see them at the swap meets, and I really recommend them. I think they work better. These will give you a little bit lower tone on a small engine, but it sure doesn't help the bottom end. And I think this is one of the reasons why these single port engines are claimed to make a little bit more grunt, is because with a smaller tube, that air has to speed up to get into the head. So it's going faster, and it has a little bit more of a ram effect. But hopefully with this setup, I'm going to get some good gas mileage too. I'm really anxious to try it. I'm running the little round bowl 30 pick 1. I've got a 65 idle jet and a 130 main jet. I like the accessibility of it. This had a 6-volt choke on it, and I had a 30 pick 3 with a 12-volt choke, electric choke. So I've taken and swapped them out, and it went right in there. I hope this is a good one, and I hope it works right. What else do we want to talk about? I've got I don't have the valve cover gaskets in there. I mocked up a set of stock rocker arm assemblies, since this is a stock cam and stock springs. I'm going to run a stock rocker shaft. Although if you look closely here, you'll see that I have these swivel feet adjusters on it. Now, they are slightly off center, which I don't really think it's going to turn the valve. they used to keep the lifters, the keepers inside the valve retainers, they used to make contact so that the valve could turn. One of the basic hot rod things is to use chromoly retainers and chromoly keepers with the heavy duty springs, which we're not doing, and you have them tight. You make sure there's a gap between the keepers, and that way they won't come apart and they won't screw up the valve, the end of the valve. And with having these type of adjusters, I get a more consistent adjustment for a longer period of time. The stock adjusters rubbing on the stock valves, they don't make valves the same way they used to. Those old sodium filled valves with the hardened tips on them, man, those adjusters, things would wear. You couldn't get the valves out of your head until you ground those things down, and you know, it's just easier on everything. I've got some new valve covers, and I've added an TheEZGZ mod. I'm taking claim and credit for this. Since I'm running stock rocker assemblies, I shouldn't have to worry about anything, but I've got ratio rockers in mind. Anytime you add a cam, anytime you add spring tension, anytime you do a lot of those sort of things, if you don't change your oil often enough, and just from age, these little wave washers, we'll take a little closer look at those, they can break, and when they break, they will lay down in here. I'm putting these little magnets. These are super strong magnets. I got them at Ace Hardware. I've never put them in my valve cover before. Gene Berg used to talk about putting a cow magnet on the down tube where your oil pickup goes into a deep sump oil system, and I thought, you know, this is a good idea. I'm using so many used parts here with miles on them, and I don't know if I'll leave them in there full time, but they are really sticky, and I've got the package they came in. I got them at I got them at Home Depot. I'm going to use these nylock nuts, and I'm going to paint the intake manifolds a different color. I like the satin black. This is a shiny black. I haven't decided whether I want to go with the gloss black or to go with satin black. I don't know. It's going to be visible on either card that I run it on, and it seems like the dirt and junk doesn't stick as easy to the gloss black, and you know, shiny is kind of nice when you have things. I don't like these aftermarket valve covers that have paint on the inside. These were either powder coated or something. I bought them before. It doesn't come off, but I don't think it transfers the heat as well. If you just, you know, I don't try to get it out of the inside unless you got a sandblaster. And be careful when you're cleaning parts with a sandblaster. It can, you know, be careful. Do not clean your engine case with a sandblaster on anything on the inside. And if you're doing it on the outside, cover everything up. And you really don't even think about putting that down your oil galleys or any of that stuff. I don't care if you take the plugs out, put threaded plugs in, and brush it out. That's not a good way to go. Sandblasters are not a good way to go. Pressure washers and solvent tanks are a good way to go. And that's been the most difficult part, cleaning this stuff, getting this tin work down, and getting this stuff clean. I'm spending so much more time. You can get a brand new set of tins for $24, and for the amount of time that I spent on this, and usually the old ones are always ripped, torn, stripped. They have problems here and there. This happened to be a pretty good set. And I used this, a wire brush on a drill works well, and then I used my electric grinder over here with the brush on one side, and I did manage to throw things across the shop a few times, and I didn't have my glove on once. Be careful, be safe. You notice I don't have a guard over there, but I need to see and I need to articulate all my things that I'm doing over there. You can take this type of a brush and you can put it in your drill press, and you can put it on a higher speed or not, and you can have both hands free to move things around. All right, where else are we going here? Oh, we got so much to cover, so much more to do. It's gonna be, it's just you know, I'm savoring this. I'm having fun. I'm not rushing through this job because my vehicles are all running. I have engines in them. I'm not trying to milk this or drag it out. I'm thinking to myself, I wish I had more money so that I could start my next engine project. I just have all these different scenarios that I want to try out in my head, and I'm already thinking to myself, after all these years of having bigger engines and more power, you know, am I you know, when you're by yourself or with somebody with a similar car and similar driving style, none of that horsepower stuff makes any difference. But if you go out with a group of people and they've got big engines and you're trying to keep up with them and they're just kind of like taking it easy and their engine's not hot and you're back there shifting away, you know, it's not there's anything the matter with that, but it's still, everybody has this natural competitive desire, and you just, I don't know, just the way it is. So what are we doing here? Okay. I've got that set of rocker arm assemblies, and you can see so many times that's one of the first modifications I do is I put solid rocker shafts on it, because I put a shim underneath my springs and it starts eating these wave washers. So this one here is pretty much cleaned up. Maybe I should put you on the stand and I'll show you more what I'm doing. Here is the best looking used one, and when you take these things apart, you really have to pull and twist to get these rock arms off. Now, my engines that have been in service, I've taken care of them and used good oil in them. It's not a bad thing to do, but I'll bet if we took one of these other engines apart, this old stalker over here that has never been touched, I mean, this is just the way it came out of the car over there. I'll bet. And if you've got a car that you picked up that's been sitting for a long time, I'll show you how easy it is to take these things apart and clean them. These are the little spring clips, and here's, you know, you can see there's been attempts over the years for me to organize my stuff. Let me put you on the tripod, and I'll just do a little bit here, and I'll show you what I'm doing. Okay, the first thing you want to do is get the radio on, get yourself a comfortable spot to sit. It's nice if you can sit down. I really love these cafeteria tables or these little portable plastic tables, and they will clean up even if you get them greasy and grimy. You can just take some solvent and wash them and scrub them, simple green and that sort of thing. So let's just, you can see how smooth, and this is how they started off. So basically what I do is I keep track of where everything goes, so I get the rocker arm back on the shaft and in the same place. But it's really pretty simple. You just take a pair of needle nose, or you can take a screwdriver and you can just pull these clips out. And I always leave one clip in someplace on the rack so that I know which side originally was outside, and I'm going to show you why. So you always got two flat washers and a wave washer in the middle, and keep in mind you got three. You always have three, just like on the flywheel shims that are back there. Those aren't just shims to keep the distance. Those things are turning and have oil in them, and just like these do, they're supposed to be that way to make up clearance and eliminate heat and problems and stuff. So okay, you got your three off. Now this doesn't, I mean, there's no pressure on here. This doesn't even want to turn. Okay, it doesn't even want to turn, and the end of that thing looks nasty. So I've got some coarse steel wool, and this is just old dried up gunky oil that's on there. These shafts, I hope, are going to be in pretty good shape. So then I'll take the next item off. I'll take my block off, and I'll put them down here on the paper in the same order that I took them off. And then I'm going to take this one off, put it on the side, and I'll put, doesn't matter on these washers and shims, but I'll just show you here. And I should have my gloves on already. Man, this stuff has been hard on your hands. So I get the first layer off, with that steel wool. Then I've got some crocus cloth. This is called crocus cloth. It's not really wet dry sandpaper, it's a fabric, and it's not like plumber's. This is very, very fine grit. It's not going to hurt anything. You could wipe this off with a little bit of brake cleaner here, and take a rag, which I don't have. Even the steel wool will clean up. You could use it. You can use paper towels on this. You have to be careful about when you're building an engine. Paper towels aren't the best thing. Little pieces of them can come off and get caught in an oil passage, and that'll really ruin your day. But on stuff like this that you're going to be blowing and have it all. Now you can see that this side is shiny. You've got the springs there, so the wear point's going to be on the bottom of the shaft. Now, if you're in a pinch and you don't have an assortment of things to go, since there's the wear spot, and that's why another reason why I want to keep track of where these clips are. You could rotate this 180 degrees and you'll have a new area. The bottom part. This is where the oil would. If you've got 100,000 miles on your engine, if you rotate this 180 degrees, because it's got to go on the stud, and they're just holes through shafts, there's nothing magical here, you can do that. Some of the aftermarket ones and some of Gene Berg's stuff, he actually had a step in there. And these blocks, they do not rotate, but the side of them is a bearing. So I'm going to go over to the wire wheel, and I'm just going to clean some of this stuff up, and just you don't really want to watch this stuff, but I want to show you the difference here of how quick this will clean up. I'll take this end rocker too. You can see it's just got that old burnt caked on oil all over the darn things, and you just got to change her off. And you can see where the rub marks are, where it's kind of polished from that spring washer, and this is where the contact is. It causes heat and wear, and those little wave washers will split in half, and sometimes I've had it happen. You'll end up falling off, and you'll know when it happens, because most of the time this thing will move over, it'll come off the end of the valve, and it'll clatter like hell. You think, oh no, connecting rod or something like that. So you pull over, and that ride is done until you can get this thing addressed. And that's why I'm going to carry a complete spare shaft with wave washers. If you use the aftermarket solid rocker shafts, you do not have that problem, but it's going to be noisier. And in my tub buggy especially, you hear every little thing. And on this particular build, I want it to be as quiet as possible. It's going to be an old man's car. So let me just clean this up real quick. Doesn't take a lot of time. Wear safety glasses or have a shield. I got a shield right here. It's like new. That's really a dumb thing to say. You should probably wear some gloves or something too. And this stuff will have a tendency, if you don't hold it, it'll shoot off across the shop, disappear. I just never had to do this with most of my stuff because I've had better quality stuff. I'm just cleaning up the shop. This is stuff that's been sitting around for years. And it's really costing me a lot of time. If I had a solvent tank and a pressure washer, well, coulda, woulda, if you can if your life away, you know? And if you're worried about money, it just doesn't happen. Then I go over here to this side of the shop because I've got my Dremel tool there. I cared much for Dremel tools, but I have used it a lot for these little fine jobs. And that little wire brush fits right inside the bore, because there's dried up stuff inside there, and there's spots I can't get to on that other wire wheel. And this just gets right in there. It just doesn't have enough power to do heavy duty stuff, but for this little fine detailed work, getting inside crevices, I've never used it this much before. I've had this thing for years, and I'm finding all kinds of little uses for it in this. Yeah. I could probably set this all up closer to my bench. I could probably put the bench grinder right here on my bench so I'd never have to get off my butt at all. But there's no point in doing that either. It's good to get up and move around. I've got a piece of steel plate here, and I've got my crocus cloth here, and what I'll do is I'll take it, and it doesn't sit quite flat. I have to have one edge off of it, and I'll give it just a little fine circular motion. I'm not trying to remove metal, I'm trying to remove crud, and I'm trying to polish the end. So you can, I don't know if it shows up on that. This side here, you can see the two shiny spots, and now I'll hold it down here, and if you don't feel like, you'll feel it drag in the beginning, and then it'll start getting easier. And you probably got most of the junk off. You can start on this crocus cloth is fairly cheap, and it's not gonna scratch up your surfaces. If anything, it polishes them up. Makes a big difference. And that block. Now, this is interesting too. I was looking in the Bentley book, and I can't remember what it was I was looking for. It was something on the rocker arm assemblies. And it said on the single carburetor models to put the gap facing down. And on the dual carb models to put the gap put on the top. And I thought, well, I've always put them on the top. It seems like this makes a little reservoir to hold oil so it can run down here and lubricate things, and you've got oil splashing around in there. So I don't know why, but that was interesting. And I looked in 4 or 5 other books, and they all said to put it to the top. So just thought I'd throw that out there. So now I'm going to take my brake cleaner, and I'm going to spray some. I usually do this standing over a bucket, but I'm just going to do it here on the bench. Okay, I spray some of that through the hole. I take the adjuster screw. Here's a stock adjuster screw, and that's why when you're adjusting your valve, sometimes you'll rotate the valve where you think you're going to tighten it, and it gets loose because somebody waited so long and didn't change their oil so much that there's little flats all over the ends of these things. So yeah, and on this one here, you want to get some junk in there. Brake clean, and then you want to get some compressed air, and you want to clean them all out. And I'll clean it out of that cup, and I am out of air. And I'm not going to start the compressor there, but just blow it out with compressed air. And you can dry it off. If you have I have a brake cylinder home, but it doesn't get small enough to get in there. If you have something small enough, I would be cautious. You could maybe take a bolt and put a slot in it, take some of this crocus cloth and wrap it up and put it in there. I've just been folding it around my finger because there is on the top. It's not on the bottom. It's polished on the bottom where the wear spot is, but on the top edge here, it's kind of burnt, and it's kind of it's not so nice. Now compare these two side by side, and you can see how much cleaner that is. There's still a little bit more junk here, but I'm trying to go a little bit faster for the video, and it's just a matter of taking your time and enjoying the ride a little bit. It's no different than tying flies is for somebody else. I'm going to take some of this crocus cloth and I'm just going to put it on here, and I'm just going to show you the difference. See how much nicer that was? I had to turn it with my hand. It doesn't even want to turn because all this stuff is gunked up. Then I'm going to go over there with my little washers, and I'm just going to hold them. I don't know if you want to pinch them with vice grips because this is going to be a bearing surface, and you just want to go through them. If you see some real worn ones, and you'll be able to tell, they'll just be thin, and it just depends on how bad a shape they are. Don't use them. These little clips here, sometimes you'll see some of them that have a real flat spot on the side because it got so gunked up that all three of them were rotating. You see how can you see that in the camera, the light shining off that, how flat this got? This side has been on the outside, so it's rounded and smooth. You just really have to use your powers of observation and watch this stuff. And all this stuff can't show you what, let's take a look at some other nicer ones, the aftermarket blocks here. Let me just grab them here. I got them sitting right here. I didn't want to mess up the whole table with them. Okay. These are some nice Geenberg rocker shafts with Geenberg swivel feet adjusters. And I want to tell you about these CB performance adjusters. I've had a couple of people tell me they had bad luck with them. 2 people. And it doesn't come with any kinds of directions. It looks pretty self-explanatory. Take them out of the package, undo the old one, and put the new one in. Well, you need to soak these in oil. You need to submerge them in oil and wiggle and move this thing around. You need to pre-lube this thing. That's a dry socket the way they come. There might be some sort of assembly lube or something in there, but they're not ready to go. Just put them out of the package and go. You might get lucky, and it might work with stock springs, but you know, if they're dry and they're going up and down 8 times a second, you're talking about some heat there, and you're talking about some stress. You always, always, always will have to use, if you're doing a direct replacement, you'll have to put these shims under the blocks to lift it up to compensate for this. And you want to rotate your engine and do a dry run on that engine and make sure that when that spring and when this thing travels back and forth, you don't get it caught. If you don't use this shim, this cup, by the time you get it adjusted, will be damn near inside the head. Depends on how bad your valves are sunk in. Maybe you've got a set of heads they did a valve job on, and they ground your valves and they ground the seats. That will move everything, and that can create massive problems. You have to find, you need to check your rocker arm geometry. If you're using, you take half the lift of that particular cam lobe on that particular cam, and your rocker arm should be 90 degrees away from the valve, and you at mid travel. If you've got it, if it's leaning in or leaning back, you're putting unnecessary side wear on the valve guide, and it's not going to wear evenly, and your valve guides will wear out earlier. I'm not going to say it's going to happen in 100 miles. And, you know, for crying out loud, I was watching some videos and guys talking about they put these Engel 100 cams and they don't do anything else, and they put their engines back together. Man, I've never had that kind of luck. I have busted these I've never done that in the first place, but even with a stock engine, I've put a shim underneath the spring, and these wave washers just started going left and right. And it's a matter of, it's done. You either go home and fix it or get towed. But you don't want to drive it that way very far for sure, driving it onto a trailer. Here you can see how they use a bolt in the end of the shaft. It comes with a shaft, comes with a bolt and a washer, and an assortment of spacers so that you can set this up. Because it's going to vary from head to head. Depends on where your rocker arm studs are. I mean, there's going to be a few thousandths difference. They do this stuff at the factory. But when you go with these solid shafts, you want to make sure that you have at least 5 thousandths clearance minimum. You don't want it tight because things expand when they get hot. And you don't want to get it where it galls the bearing surface and screws things up. And you can see where I actually put a spacer on the side of the block. Must have been where it had to be on this one, because it's not on the other side. That's kind of crazy. That is kind of crazy. Huh. But that must have been the way it turned out. So anyhow, and the thing was nice about the Gene Berg adjusters, you could put an Allen wrench in there to adjust it. It's so much easier than using a screwdriver in a slot. So there's a pair of, an example of a solid rocker shaft. Here's an example of some aftermarket 1.25 ratio rockers. These are MP jobs, and it comes with a lot bigger shaft. It comes completely assembled like this. You don't have to get goofy. One of the ways they get the offset, that 1.25 ratio, is by offsetting the hole in a larger shaft. It moves it over, and that's what you're doing. You're increasing the ratio, and you're taking the adjuster nut off of the spring and putting it on the push rod. Now, you know, this for ratio rockers and high lift cams over 1/2 inch, 500 thousandths of an inch, you know, these are the kinds of things that you want to look at. Now, if you generally have to shorten the push rod, and the only way to calculate that is to have the push rod tube out of the way. And, you know, basically means you got to pull the head. And every Volkswagen needs a valve job anyhow, so you need to set it up right. And you'll need to replace these rocker studs with longer ones, because if you have heavy duty springs or double springs and you try to put them on with a stock rocker bolt, it ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna happen, buddy. There's not gonna be any threads here. So you got to do it the right way, and that's all there is to it. So the shims, again, you know, you may have to use shims with this type of a setup. You just have to check it. Now you can see here on the side of the shaft on the block, they even milled the corner off the block, because look at how that articulates past there. Everything kind of changes because now the adjuster's on the push rod instead of on the spring. And when you do this type of a setup, if you use these type, you have to use lash caps. Here's some lash caps. Now, I've used ratio rockers before. It's more expensive than just buying a performance cam. The advantage of doing this on a stock engine, I could run stock aluminum push rods and a stock rocker arm assembly. I'd want the solid shafts. I wouldn't want these springs, you know. I would want heavy. You always have to increase your spring pressure when you use these type of setups. It doesn't make any difference at an idle or to like 3,000-4,000 RPM. You're pushing it at even 4,000 RPM. You'll get valve float, and what valve float is it's moving too fast, and your spring it works for a while. It'll work awesome. You take off down the block and you'll say, yeah, this is great. But it's beating your valves. If you are revving it high and redlining it every time you shift, showing off your buddies constantly, it's going to trash your heads. Your valve guides, your seats might come loose. That can be catastrophic. It happens to a lot of guys. They build a nice engine, and then they don't do the valve train right, and it comes apart on them, and it'll ruin your day. Let me tell you, don't want to set that in that dirt there. Find this. That's the other thing. Before, did I cover everything on that I wanted to? I hope so. So if you use these ratio rockers, you need to use lash caps. You need to shorten your push rods. You're probably going to not use aluminum ones. You're probably going to go with chromoly. You're going to have to custom cut those. It's going to cost you more money than if you have a competition cam, but you're stuck with it. Where I was going with that example was you could probably take that off and change it to the hot rod version for the weekend, and you could go back and forth. But I don't see why you'd want to do that. If you have the right cam, the right carburation, the right exhaust, these things will run as smooth as stock and last a long time. Probably longer if you do it right, because you're spending all that money. You're gonna be better with your maintenance and checking things. And when you start doing this stuff, and thrashing on it, that's why out in the sand we always traveled in packs together, because if somebody broke down you could pull them back on a strap, and we were never that far from camp. So the other thing I want to touch base on is once you get these cleaned up, I love this squirt oil can. Before you put this stuff on the shaft and reassemble it, squirt some oil in there, both sides. You'll notice that there's 2 holes in there. So the oil's coming up the push rod, right? It's coming up your push rod. This is actually, the push rod's on the bottom. So it's coming up the push rod, and every time this thing goes back and forth, in addition to your oil pressure, that's kind of acting like a pump. So that surgeon is causing some extra oil to go in there, and it lubricates this inner bearing. It also travels to the other side and goes up. It doesn't come out like over here. It goes behind the thread. And so your adjusting screw, I hope I'm in the camera on that. I probably wasn't. I have to do a video 15 times, seems like. But the oil splashes out the thread, and that's what gets on top of in the end of your valve and keeps that lubricated and wet and helps remove some of the heat that's going on right there. So you want to lubricate this. You can put a little bit of lubriplate or some type of assembly lube in there before you reassemble these things and before you put it back on the engine. And if you have an old car that's just ancient, this is a very simple thing that you can do before you start driving it this summer, is take these apart, check them out. If you do the maintenance, you won't have the breakdowns, hopefully, not as many of them at any rate, and just clean things up, and it allows you to get an idea of the overall shape of your motor, or if you bought a used motor from somebody else, it'll help you figure that stuff out. So, I hope that helps you out today. You can always flip these things over, do different things with them. I clean them up on the wire wheel over there and call it good. And I lubricate it all up, and I lubricate it on the engine before I start it up that first time. So, there you go. That's kind of what it looks like and where we're at. And it's just time consuming. You just sit here, like I say, get lost with the radio and have some fun. And with that, I think I'm going to wrap this up. It's gone on pretty long. I hope I didn't leave anything out. If you got any questions, or leave them down in the comments. I appreciate everything you guys add to make this channel better. And I really suggest that you look at some of the comments. They're not all just attaboy comments. Sometimes there's comments down there that have good information, and if you see me doing something totally wrong that I shouldn't, there's a lot of controversy out here, and there's, they have articles in the magazines. There's a lot of stuff that's out there to sell products, and there's a lot of products that are out there that look like they should work, just like these MP rockers. I have not used those. Those are brand new, but I do have some that I have used, and it's just the same thing, just a little bit different. So I think we'll just leave it at that, and I'm going to get to continuing with my cleaning and housework here, watching it snow. So thanks for watching. Thanks for subbing. TheEZGZ out. Summer's just around the corner. Get out there in the garage and get that car running.